Welcome to Michigan Reimagined, presented by Good Marketing and Wagoner Financial. And here's your host, Chris Buck.
Inventors and innovators need to protect their inventions and processes, and it's not just a one-time effort. Here to share some important need-to-know tips and how to follow him for regular updates is the senior attorney for Foster Swift, Collins and Smith, PC, Mr. Mikhail Murshak. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I enjoy having you on. I've been following you on LinkedIn and a couple other platforms, and I just have really noticed you becoming more and more of a thought leader, like a lot of content on a more regular basis that gets the wheels turning, and I love it. And I wanted to have you come in and share some of your thoughts. So talk about, wind the clock back a little bit for our listeners and tell us how you got involved in practicing law, specifically intellectual property.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I come from a long background of scientists and STEM background in my family. So when my family immigrated in 1980 and I was just a 2-year-old, you know, my parents had their degrees in chemical engineering or chemistry, technical, and essentially pushed that down on my sister, my brother, and I, and we all ended up at Michigan State and getting degrees in chemical engineering. And about my junior year, I decided to, you know, quote unquote, rebel against my family's history and start thinking about law school or something different, something where I could be more engaged with individuals versus sitting in front of a screen and working on spreadsheets and trying to solve very complex mathematical problems. Even while I was in undergrad, I developed a real hunger and passion for teaching. So I taught calculus when I was in undergrad, I couldn't believe that they were paying for me for this. I didn't have to wash dishes. I didn't have to bartend. I was getting paid to be a teaching assistant, teach recitations. I would hold final exam review sessions. And my best friend and I, we both were doing it, and we ended up filling rooms with like 300 people because we just enjoyed it so much, and we had a lot of fun with the students, and that carried on. So once I got into law school is where I really found out about intellectual property, exposure to it. There's very few technical science background type individuals back then in the year 2000 to 2003. And so as soon as I got there, people started saying, oh, you have a science background, you should go into patent law. And so I sort of pursued that, and it just felt it was easier for me to find good jobs with good law firms and experience early on, where other people that were crushing it at law school had to take unpaid internships with a judge's clerkship and so on. So that's sort of how I slipped into that. And what's fortunate, unfortunate, is now law school is designed, and I think this may be across the board, whether you're getting your MBA or any kind of graduate school professional degree, they want you to silo and focus so early. So once I took that first summer internship with a patent law firm, that sort of in some ways locked my path. I'm not saying it's impossible, but now that I teach law school, I see what happens to these students, and it's fantastic if you do well enough and you can get a job where the law firms let you jump from department to department to department. Right. But I think even in my own law firm, we hire somebody and they're in the litigation group for the summer or for interns, or they're in the tax group for the summer, or real estate or estate planning, et cetera. So I was pigeonholed early, but also was able to obtain jobs that were interesting, still technical, scientific, and I didn't deal with some of the more complex, let's say, personal issues like family law or litigation, where people feel like their lives are at stake in those processes. This was an opportunity to work with inventors, but also see how innovation moved companies forward, and whether they were large Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies like Chrysler, GM, Ford, aerospace companies like Pratt & Whitney, or their suppliers who are also doing innovation. It was exciting and interesting, and it was recession-proof. I mean, we're not all dismissive of the fact that people have to earn a living and find a path forward. So,
right. Yeah. So, you know, I learned this once, and maybe I'm alone in this, but can you just, as we get into this, explain the difference between patents, copyrights, and trademarks?
Yeah, the simplest, there's a big difference, and people fumble though. Yeah, they interchange them. They say, oh, where's that copyright I need? Or I came up with this name and I need a copyright on it. Well, names are not copyrightable. So the easiest way to distinguishes them is copyright is for artistic works of expression. So original works of expression. So if you write a song, you draw a picture, you record music, anything that you capture in a tangible medium, including designs on websites, which I know some of your listeners are going to be curious about, right? You can almost everybody that posts a website is going to put a copyright notice at the bottom because you don't actually have to have a registration to protect your copyright interest. Okay. But the way that if you hire someone to do a website, right, you're good at doing radio interviews, you might have zero skills in building a website. You have to make sure that the agreement that you put in place is protecting the ownership of the content and or the design images that you want to have made for you. So work made for hire is an important aspect of copyright law. Copyright's all about artistic expression. Patents are all about inventions, and you can only obtain a patent protection on 4 categories of inventions. So you can obtain a patent on composition of matter, article of manufacture, machine, or process. Okay. And so that's something that's completely different than artistic expression, right? So if you invent a new widget or a new toy or a new engine or a new metal or polymer, that's potentially patentable, and that's why you see a lot of large organizations are the ones that participate in the patent world, like the automotive industry, aerospace industry, chemical industry, even software, which is tricky. But IBM has been the largest patent filer for years and years and years. And then trademarks is separated from both of those because trademarks, it doesn't matter who created it, right? In patent and copyrights, the author has to be original author. Patents have to be made by inventions, actual inventors. You can't steal someone's idea and file a patent on it, technically. Trademarks are all about branding. So it's any word, combination of word, device, or otherwise, or design that communicates a source of goods or services. So when you see the McDonald's word, you associate that with the company, the source, that they're providing restaurant services.
And the I'm loving it.
Sure, and that's exactly, that's a catchphrase. So that's a slogan, and they have been using it in commerce. They've been using it in sales and commercials, et cetera, and they put it on some of their bags and so on for the restaurant services, and they're able to protect that. And what's interesting is that patent law is designed to protect inventors and essentially advance innovation. Copyrights are to protect artistic expression and encourage the advancement in creating, new art. And trademarks are there to protect the public. So it's more of an economic vehicle. Trademarks are not designed to protect, people think of them that way, and companies should be thinking of that, but technically they're protecting the consumer and the customer from confusion. So when I walk into a store and I want to buy Gatorade, I don't have to ask the person there and have them convince me that this blue drink is Gatorade from the Gatorade company that I trust has the same quality and characteristics as every other Gatorade I've purchased before. Now, it could be low quality stuff, and maybe you like that because the price is cheaper. It doesn't matter your reason, but at least I know that I'm purchasing this from the Gatorade company and not some knockoff brand or somebody else somewhere else. So that's what trademark is protecting the consumer. It provides economic efficiency that we have trademarks. So I don't walk in and say, hey, where's that blue drink that has this many electrolytes and this much sugar and tastes this way? I can just walk in and say, there's the Gatorade in the fridge, grab it, and put it on the counter. And if someone comes out with a brand that's confusingly similar, I, as a consumer, may be wondering, is this from the same Gatorade company? Can I trust it? Can I not trust it?
Right.
Yeah. And to be honest, price differentiation is a good reason that people get caught buying knockoff goods, right? So if I want to buy Lululemon or Gucci online and all of a sudden it's a tenth of the price that you normally would expect, right? Because as the public, you expect a certain quality characteristics, price is a characteristic of a brand or a label. And if it's below that, far below that, that should raise red flags that this is probably not accurate. In fact, I almost got caught buying Viore clothing after Black Friday because I got some weird alert and it was saying everything was like 65% off. Well, anyone that buys Viore from a Playmakers or from anywhere else online knows they never go on sale. So as I was adding stuff into my cart, I started thinking, wait a minute, this can't be the real company. And if you investigate for 2 minutes, you'll figure out, oh yeah, this is improper and this is fraud.
Well, yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, I've been in New York City recently, and there's folks selling $75 Rolex watches.
Sure.
that look great. So who patrols that? I guess someone needs to be. I mean, obviously Rolex is the aggrieved party.
And it's a really it's interesting and a complicated question. And I had a professor in law school that actually worked for companies like Gucci and Rolex, et cetera, and he used to have to put on a bulletproof vest as a lawyer, go with the U.S. Marshals when they've identified a knockoff shop on Canal Street in New York, which is where it all happens. And this was the stories he would tell us in class. And the marshal would say, okay, ready, go. And they'd go raid a store. And the second they would open the van doors and all these U.S. Marshals would pop out. And he had to be there as the attorney to verify that these are not his clients' products, right? He had to go by it through the inventory. The bad actors, which there's a lot of information at Michigan State. Michigan State has an ACAP center, so they're an anti-counterfeiting group. And when you listen to the companies that are impacted by counterfeiters, it's not just the high-end brands like Louis Vuitton and Gucci. A lot of it is automotive parts, consumer products like refrigerators, and like Whirlpool deals with a lot of counterfeit goods, and that's scary because it voids warranties or it causes damage, or if the parts are bad. And there's reason to believe that they're tied to terrorist organizations that are funding these organizations. But going back to the story in New York, he would get out of the van and all of a sudden you'd hear pop, 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 pop. That sounded like gunfire. And then you'd see these motorcycles fly out of the street, which were the people running the stores, and they were throwing those little pop pellet firecrackers. They were throwing firecrackers to make it sound, and everybody would go crazy and be chaos so they could get away. And then, they go into the store, raid, and confiscate all the products. 2 days later, it'd be reopened. Now, the lesson of the store is not that they shouldn't care. However, the lawyer had 2 points. Number one, anyone buying a real Gucci bag for a couple $1,000s is probably never going to Canal Street to buy one for $50. Meanwhile, the person that's buying a $50 fake bag is probably never walking into Saks Fifth Avenue and buying the $2,000 bag or what have you, Rolex watch. So it's somewhat interesting from the standpoint of like, what are you actually protecting? Having said that, they have to police it themselves. They have to hire a lawyer. They have to provide some evidence for the U.S. Marshals to jump in. There's also, if you own trademark registrations, which is important, and for companies like that, it's important to also own trademark registrations overseas, which is a whole other complex issue. They can proactively work with customs to protect shipments of counterfeit goods on the front end. And so a lot of times when Michigan State Law School used to do an international intellectual property day, they bring in an officer from the customs office, they would bring from the counterfeit office, and they bring in people from like Whirlpool, et cetera, that would talk about current issues. And I remember the Whirlpool putting up 2 parts on the screen. One was counterfeit, one wasn't. And he said even the people at Whirlpool can't tell it apart.
Huh.
Yeah. So they're very good. They're very impressive, and they're very well funded. But I encourage everybody to not purchase counterfeit goods. You really don't know what you're voting for with your money. A line I stole from the famous Chris Buck, which, by the way, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, I just want to say that Lansing, how lucky we are to have a guy like Chris Buck who takes the time to put together this radio show, exposes a lot of very interesting people, a lot of cool things that are happening in the region. So I just want to say I'm very thankful for Chris Buck.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Mike. I'm thankful for you. I mean, and seriously, I read your content, and I know how hard you work on your behalf of your clients and to gain new clients and stuff. And I'm just impressed by your knowledge in an area that I know nothing about. I'm reasonably smart in a lot of different ways, but I'm not in this way. So I always learn as much as I put out there. So thanks for joining me. And in that vein, I'd like to give a nod to our friends at Good Marketing. Here at Michigan Reimagine, we tell the stories of passionate Michiganders doing great things across the state, like Mike Murshak. Today's podcast sponsor takes the art of positive storytelling to a whole new level. The good people at Good Marketing work with organizations across the state that are having a positive impact on the lives of Michigan residents. They help educate communities on the importance of affordable housing, the impact of wildlife and natural resource management, the availability of workforce development and education programs. If it lifts people up and makes communities stronger, and they want to help spread the word. If your organization needs help communicating the good work you do, stop by their website at goodmarketing.com. That's GUD marketing.com. So I mentioned that you've kind of ramped up your social media footprint, or however you might want to put that. I know I've stumbled across these really accessible couple 100-word, 5-paragraph teasers, not even teasers because it gets to the conclusion. Talk a little bit about how you've decided to make that downshift and how you pick the topics that you report on.
Yeah, I started thinking about seeing some other attorneys, et cetera, that are providing information out there, right? So social media is everywhere. And I started looking around over the last couple of years as to what's going on in intellectual property. And sometimes, honestly, to be honest, years ago, when I used to try to go to the gym in the morning and walk on the elliptical or treadmill or something, I'd say, okay, well, it's morning and I should be getting to work. So instead of like listening to music or a podcast, I'm gonna find a YouTube that actually teaches me something about intellectual property. So I'd start watching, PowerPoint presentations and learning about certain subjects related to patent law. And then as social media increased and essentially the little snippet that you have available, the videos, there was one guy that I thought was interesting, but it was almost like heavy marketing and less informational.
Okay. And
he wasn't gaining a lot of traction. So it's like, okay, he is putting out a lot of content, but it's not really connecting with people. And if you go back to I'm glad you brought up my history of how I arrived here, because education's always been number one in my family. When I went to law school, that was after the point of my mom insisting that, who's, by the way, is also an entrepreneur. She was insisting that you get your engineering degree so I know that you can find a job forever and that you're essentially raised your floor and now you can do whatever you want.
Right.
So, which I didn't do. I mean, in theory, I could have gone, I would have loved to be like on someone's basketball coaching staff, but there's a long road of making $0 when you pursue that path. And I, credit anyone that's willing to go through it. Anyway, regardless, so I decided to go to law school, and again, I was an educator in undergrad. I became an educator in law school, which actually earned me a scholarship related to First Amendment rights and teaching to high school kids. And then it took me a minute after I graduated law school because, I always say when you graduate college or graduate law school, it's almost like you become a baby all over again. If you're a brand new baby, like your last guest just has a brand new baby, right?
Yep.
You can't feed yourself. You can't take care of yourself. You don't know what's going on. And every day you're learning and developing more. And I think when you get into college or just get out of college or law school, it's like you're a baby adult. So now you're responsible for things, but you don't know what you're doing. A lot of these kids don't know how to, they know that adulting became a verb, right? Over the last 10 years, 15 years. And, I got to learn to do my own laundry. I got to learn to pay bills. I got to learn to budget. I got to learn to figure out if I'm investing properly or if I'm saving effectively. And I got to learn to be productive in my office. And, some of my law school students, they say it's like drinking from a fire hose their first year. And so now in 2012, I started teaching at Cooley. In 2020, I started teaching at Michigan State, and I really love it. And I enjoy it. It helps you become an expert. But I realized, essentially, long story long, is, listen, people need this information. Every time I'm more involved with the startup community than the legacy type clients.
Okay. Yep.
And the startup community, they don't know what's going on. They don't understand how much it's going to cost or how long it's going to take and what is or what is not protectable. And I thought, listen, I can generate very easy, digestible content with the help of lots of tools, including AI, which has been such a godsend, at least in my practice. But and now there's an effort with Jake, who's here with me from the marketing department, to expand our exposure. And we have a sports podcast at the law firm, which has been really great and really fun. And
or like NIL.
Yeah,
kind of
a lot of it's focused on NIL and representing athletes and so on. And other people post blogs. But what I just realized is look, there's a lot of simple content information that we can put out there, make it interesting and short and digestible, and people will have a little bit more awareness. And that way, when they come to see me, it's not like I'm starting from zero,
right?
Explaining how the process works. What's the difference between a patent, copyright, and trademark? A lot of times they'll know that ahead of time. So that's helpful. And I can put together a large portfolio and I can point them to those articles to help push that through.
Right on. Well, I want to unpack a couple of those, but first you talked about the startup ecosystem, and I want to remind everyone that this episode is brought to you by the Michigan Rise Pre-Seed Fund, providing early-stage funding to Michigan-based startups. Since 2020, Michigan Rise has helped high-tech, high-growth startup companies achieve commercial and technical milestones through capital formation strategies, talent development, and customer acquisition tactics. With financing options for every stage of the entrepreneurial journey, Michigan Rise significantly increases the impact of new ideas and research. Visit MichiganRise.com to discover how Michigan Rise can help you fuel your startup's growth. Michigan Rise is supported by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and the Michigan State University Research Foundation.
I just want to add one more point of gratefulness.
Please. Yeah.
And in that I'm not doing this by myself. If I had my own law firm, getting this content out there would be challenging. I have, just like Michigan Rise tries to help these companies lift up, but they can't, not everybody can do this by themselves, but people can do a lot when they have help. I actually have a law firm with a robust marketing group with a guy like Jake who can help me. He can say, hey, this is on the back end. This is going to go up on the internet here. JD Super is going to pick it up. They can style it and structure the article however they want. They can tell me whether it should have an image or not. And now all I have to do is just generate the short content, edit it, maybe do a lot of fact checking and so on. And then, and then let them push it out to the world. I mean, I never had that before up until I got to a place like Foster Swift. And prior to any of that stuff, social media didn't exist. It wasn't as accessible to be able to share this information as easy as we can now.
Right. Well, the output is impressive. So your marketing team and your content is all kind of blending together to make an impact. Enough for me to call you and say, come on the show and talk about the stuff I'm reading about you. So
I thought about that.
It's effective.
And it's a real team effort. So I'm very grateful for my marketing team, for Kim and Jessica and Jake.
Right on. Well, I want to talk about one article you talked about, copyright trolls.
Sure.
And that resonated with me because that just happened to me.
Oh, geez.
The company I'm working about now, I got an email out of nowhere that just said, hey, I'm an attorney in another state, and we have a client who has the same company name.
Sure.
And if you want to kind of compete for the rights to that, you've got this deadline basically to pay this fee or whatever. And I'm like, what? Because it looked super, super legit. And I'm a pretty good sniffer out of BS and spam and that kind of stuff. And I actually took it to someone on our team and just said, first of all, how the hell did they find me? I've been there that long, and my role wouldn't be someone that would be obvious to hit this message with. But it also seems like something I don't want to ignore. Can someone proof this and confirm whether it's junk or real? And it sounds like it's exactly what, and that's the article that I read by you a couple of weeks later. I'm like, that's so funny because I think that just happened.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to put that out, because we're getting, a handful per month of people saying, hey, my client, Mike, can you take a look at this email my client sent me? So none of the lawyers know either, unless they've been exposed to it before. And the very first time I was exposed to one, I did, a deep dive, went down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out who this law firm was. How dare they contact a company like this? It was so unethical. It's totally illegal on most ethical standards, non-solicitation requirement, even though I think they frame it to where they think they can get away with it. They're not legitimate law firms. They're not legitimate people. I actually called the person someone picked up who definitely wasn't the person they were pretending to be. I did Google image searches on the images on that website and realized that these are fake people. These are fake clients. They're not even, they're real names sometimes, but I even emailed one of the people that did a testimonial. They had a little quote, what a great law firm this is. And I emailed that person. I found that person on LinkedIn and emailed them and said, hey, is this legitimate? Do you actually use this law firm? Because this is what they've posted with your little quote. And they said, no, not at all. That's wild that they did that. The point is, it's unethical for law firms to contact you without any kind of relationship. That's considered, most states have and I'm not an ethical expert in terms of professional responsibility, but lawyers are not allowed to solicit clients without developing a relationship in the first place, right? You can advertise all you want, but to have a direct email feels very much, Bush League or improper.
Right.
Also, that is not how the trademark system works at all. So if they had a client, it's a violation. Number one, they're violating their ethical obligation of non-solicitation. Number two, they're violating their confidentiality agreement, because there's no way someone representing client A would then reach out to client B and say, hey, do you want this? Because it looks like you have it, but my client's going to get it, and therefore you'll be in trouble, so call us. That's not how it works. And also, it would be a violation of the privilege that their fake client has. And number three, use in trademark law, branding, use is the ultimate winner, I guess. That leads everything. So people a lot of times are saying, well, can I sell things if I use this? Can I sell things? You don't need permission to sell, right? We all have the right to sell lemonade and set up lemonade stands in our neighborhood and do anything we want. The problem comes in is if you use a name that's confusingly similar to one that's already out there or that's registered.
Right.
And that creates a potential conflict. So if you are a startup and you're about to launch with a brand new name, there's a couple issues that a quick consultation with an attorney can help you sort out, right? So you can do a knockout search for relatively inexpensive. It's like usually less than $1,000. And we take a look at everything that's registered or pending registration, because all the trademark applications are published and they're all federal. There is a state type of trademark, but that's for limited cases. That it's mostly ineffective. But federal registrations are really important. They come up in searches. So if your name, like the GUD brand, right, that I'm staring at on your wall, yeah, good marketing. If they protect that design, it will come up in other searches, and they'll have if they have a federal registration, the R with the circle, which I noticed one of the only brands on your wall that has a R with a circle, which is essentially claiming trademark rights, is State Farm, which is probably one of the largest brands on your wall.
Yep.
And so that makes sense to me, right? So what I notice when I drive around town or on the highway or anywhere I go is who's presenting with the R circle and who is not. Because if they are, that's an added design feature, right? Whether it's on a sign or not, it definitely costs something to add it there, which means it's very important to them.
Yep.
And I mean, long story long is that email you received is fake. Everybody's getting them all over the country. The law firm that sent it is fake, and there's red flags all over it, but definitely do not respond. Having said that, it's actually generated some business for me, because the clients that get this email are concerned that their name might go away, even though it can't, because they've been in use for a long time. And if they were in trouble, they would get a cease and desist letter, not a letter of like, hey, you should protect this.
Right,
but then they'll say, maybe we should protect it. And I say, yeah, of course. Especially if you've been in business for a long time. The cost of obtaining a trademark is just relatively low compared to some of the other commercialization activities that you do. And it offers you this really nice layer of protection from the standpoint of it satisfies notice requirement across the country. So now you have protection nationwide. It creates a perception of ownership, perceived ownership, which is important. It's an additional asset of the organization that you build brands. So you think about valuable brands like Apple, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Walmart, Target, all these brands that have it's very valuable to them. And you can kind of see it when you see how competitors differentiate themselves from all the other brands, right? If you just throw up all the automotive brands all on one sheet, they all look different. And there's a reason for, there's a reason for that. The distinctiveness is really important. You have to distinguish your trademark from those of others.
Right.
And so, those letters, that a lot of times that pushes clients to say, maybe I should investigate what I do need to do to get a trademark. I'm definitely not using these guys. Right. Who aren't real guys anyway. They're not real lawyers.
Mike, I love the conversation. I want to have you back to talk about more stuff. We are up against the clock. But fascinating stuff. Great teasers in there not even just teasers, but things to really think about. Yeah. These are life and death. Not life and death, but money and branding and securing your life's work, to make sure that you don't get poached down the road. So I'd like to pick a couple more of these topics and have you back sooner than later to really unpack a couple more specific things now that we got into the deep end of the pool. But
I'd love that.
I really appreciate you being in.
Again, my motivation is to educate the public. I come from a family that education is important, and I think it carries on today. And I think for startups, it's even more important.
How can people get in touch with you or follow along?
Oh, great question. Well, they can find me on fosterswift.com. They can find us on LinkedIn. They can find me just by doing a Google search for my name. I teach at Michigan State as an adjunct, so I think I'm pretty accessible if people need
Not too hard to find.
get
Mike
hold of me.
Murshak, Murshak.
Yes.
So we've been talking to senior attorney from Foster Swift, Collins & Smith, PC, Mr. Mike Murshak, talking about intellectual property and the way to protect what you've worked so hard for. I really appreciate you coming in. Thanks so much. And I'd love to give a final shout out to all my loyal sponsors. We've got Wagoner Financial, Good Marketing, Triterra Environmental, Keller Williams Advantage and Team, Michigan Rise, Kirk Byron State Farm, and the attorneys at Foster Swift. All fantastic people worth the call. And if you found the show as a one-off, I'm going to remind you to follow and subscribe to Michigan Reimagined on all the places you find your podcasts. This is Chris Buck signing off for Michigan Reimagined.